to our noon connection for our Regeneration Church Facebook page. Today is a different kind of day. As I said last week on Mondays, we're doing something called Mixtape Mondays, where we have no idea what the topic is. On Friday, I got a call from my siblings that my mom was having a hard time breathing. So Saturday morning, I drove down here to Southern California, but before I left, my brother called me, and he let me know that our mom went to be with the Lord. So I didn't get here to see her before she went home to be with Jesus, but that drive, 6-hour drive on the way to Southern California was a solitary time. It was a hard time, but I think I needed that. It was a time really to pray, to consider my mom's life. And so we were able to get together yesterday. Some of the family, actually all of my immediate family, Rebekah, this is my daughter Rebekah Hennis. And Rebekah was able to come up with her husband Nate, and Deanna was able to drive the rest of our kids up. So when we got together, we just started talking about some things, and we had this time of processing. We had an opportunity to just hug each other, to cry, to pray, to consider just the impact of my mom's life. Now, one of the values that we have been talking about way before COVID-19, in the previous years, is the importance in intergenerational ministry. It's so important that every generation is able to glean from generations that are younger than them and generations that are older than them. And I don't think I've ever met anyone that has done that as well as my mom. The impact that she has had on multiple generations, and the impact she's had on our lives as well. So I asked some of the kids and the nieces and nephews if they wanted to be able to share. I think it's pretty fresh. It's really raw emotionally. It's a difficult time for us. So Rebekah, thank you. Thanks for coming on. There's the way I'll kind of lead into this is with this expression. My son Matthew had recorded my mom. It was for something he did for his school, where he wanted to record not only her telling a story and talking, but he also, when he recorded her, asked her to say whatever she wanted to say. And one of the things that she said was this phrase in Tagalog, which is a phrase that means, if you don't value your past and the people that have built into your life with gratitude, and you don't value what they've done, then you're never going to be able to get where you're trying to go. And so I wanted to ask Rebekah, you moved down here when you were in college. You were going to school at USC, but there was a time when you were living here as well. And what was that like? How did Grandma transfer some of the values and some of the things that are important to us as a family? How did she transfer some of those things to you?
Grandma's always talking to us, and she's always writing to us. So some of it is explicit in that, she'll, explicitly tell us what she thinks family should be, or, just she always tells us, there are 3 things that she would always say to me, or a few, but she would always say pray or praise, wisdom, and be fabulous was her other phrase. But I think a lot of it was implicit, just in the way she lived her life. I know that you and I have been talking about, just friends reaching out to us since Grandma's passing, and it's amazing to me how many of my friends, even as a grandchild who lived in Northern California, how many of my friends have memories with Grandma, how often Grandma would ask about all of them. It was just so clear that people were very important to her, and that making time for people and remembering them and caring about them, loving them, asking about them was so central to who she was. And that family was just so important to her. I don't doubt that there was not a day went by where she wasn't praying for all of us.
Mm-hmm. So. When my mom would call on the phone, this goes all the way back to when we first. So when Deanna and I moved to San Jose, we were the only siblings. I was the only sibling that moved away from Southern California. So my mom used to have this big map, Rand McNally, giant 18 by 24 map, and she would trace the path from West Covina, California to San Jose at the time, or Gilroy, or to Scotts Valley. And whenever we were on the road, she would chart it and where we should be by that time, and she would watch us. And then she would call, and then she would leave a message, and she would leave a message on her home answering machine when we had answering machines, and she would just talk. She would leave a message. Are there any messages that you remember that Grandma might have left for you on your phone, or maybe on someone else's phone for you, even though it wasn't your phone, but she left the message for them to give to you in a way?
Yeah, whenever she would call me, she would say, like, and tell, even if I was at college, and Matthew and Ellie and Josiah and Abby, and she would always say hi to all of them, even though obviously I was like, this is, a cell phone, they can't hear you, but she would be speaking to them on the phone. And then it was funny, we were all listening to voicemails yesterday, and a lot of them have to do with her telling us all to eat something, and just saying, like, did you make sure to get food? And yeah.
I want to show you a couple of pictures here. This one is of my mom with her siblings. This is in the 1950s. It's before 1956, because 1956 was when she moved to the United States. And so that is my mom with her siblings. And then I'm going to show you a picture of, really, when it comes to intergenerational ministry, I only met my grandparents on Grandma's side. I met them when I was 5 years old, and then when I was 19, I went back to the Philippines, and my grandpa, your great-grandpa, had already passed away. So many of the things that my mom would share were they were so strong. The value of family, the value of faith, prayer, knowing, like, seeing people and valuing each individual. It's one of the reasons why she knew all of our friends' names. She would say, "Hey, how's Robert Sinihu, from high school?" Or, "How's Eric Kyampor?" She would know, like, all of their names and what they're doing, and literally decades later would know them. But that came also from her parents. I want to show you a picture of her mom and dad. And my mom wasn't born yet. My mom was born in 1930, so this is probably in the mid-20s, 1920s. That is my grandma and my grandpa. But a lot of the things that she passed down, I realized intergenerationally, the way that it affected us is that when I went back to the Philippines and met relatives and met aunts and uncles, some of them for the first time really as an adult when I was 19 years old, I was stunned at how similar they were to my mom. From mannerisms to, I felt at home. I felt so loved. I would fall asleep at night, and Grandma used to put a towel in my back because I was sweating, and, like, she'd sprinkle baby powder sometimes, and I'd be in the Philippines, and then my aunt would do that for me, and so in those things that are passed on, what are some things, Rebekah, that you value, some things that you hold on to from Grandma that you definitely want to pass on to your kids?
One of the things that I think about most when I think of Grandma is just how she was constantly in communion with God. Like, she just, sometimes you would be talking to her, and in the middle of a conversation you realize she's praying, and so she was just praying. She would pray out loud all the time. She was always praying, so that's something that I want to learn and aspire to and pass on. And she was so generous and never complained about anything. Like, I would find out later about just really hard things that she's gone through in life, but you would never know, because there was no bitterness, never ever a feeling like people owed her, or like life wasn't fair. She just she trusted God, and she always told us to trust him. And there was just a peace about her, always. Just nothing got to her because she just trusted so much in God. And that's, I think, why she was able to be so generous and giving too, without worrying about what was going to happen, or if she was going to have enough money, or if if someone was not going to come through for her as well. She was just generous always. I think that comes from trust and like a supernatural peace.
Mm-hmm. There's another thing. I think if there's one word that, when I think of my mom, that is exemplified as far as being a Christian, it's unselfishness. Mm-hmm. Always thinking of others. I think that's a part of it as well. Growing up, she would always say, Matthew, no self-pity. Like, no self-pity, because self-pity, she saw it as a way of going inward and thinking of self. So my mom, last week, she fell. She broke 2 ribs, fractured another rib, and was in a lot of pain because of that. I think that was what started to lead to her not being, she had congestive heart failure, so she wasn't able to breathe well. And kind of going into that time, what she did is she realized that her time was short. So she called us. I was able to have a conversation with my mom. It was Friday. So Friday, right before I went live, my sister Lily called, and she said, hey, Matt, Mom wanted me to call you to see if you would pray for her. So I said, okay. It was like 11:55. So I prayed with my mom right before I went on live, and then afterwards, she called back in the afternoon, and she said, Matthew, she said, are you are you still working? I said, yeah, I'm doing some work. And she said, I just want you to know, Matthew, Deanna, Rebekah, Nate, Matthew, Josiah, Alicia, Abigail, I just want to thank you for all of your love, all of your prayers, all of your support over the years. If there's anything unpleasant, any unpleasantries, please forgive me. I love you. And then I said, Mom, and she hung up. And my mom would often do that. When she's done talking, the conversation's over. It was like she would hang up. But it was like, wow, that was really, it was different. It was like she had a task that she wanted us to remember something. And then only to find out that she called my brother, my sisters. She started calling other relatives, saying what she wanted to say to them. And then the next day, she took her last breath and went to be with Jesus. Those are the things that, they're caught more than they're taught. They're taught in words. Explicitly, she would say these things all the time. Trust Jesus, have faith, trust in the Lord, love each other, be gracious. When she was in the hospital and we did it, that was in January, she said, Matthew, live with Deanna, live with your children with grace. Be gracious to one another. And we saw that in her life. We saw that play out. So Rebekah, growing up, how did Grandma make you feel? How did she invite you into her world? She was older. So when I was born, she was almost 40. So she was much older than my parents. Mm-hmm. I mean, my friends' parents. And yet she always had a concern and brought me into her world. And then with grandkids, I think that you always felt valued. She was able to reach out at every age, from toddlerhood all the way to when you were adults. How did she make you guys as grandchildren feel valued?
She was just she was always interested in what you were doing. She, from a little kid, it's she would play, watch us play in the pool. She would bring us out graham crackers and milk. She was just always there for us, and And then growing up, whatever it is that you're interested in at the time, like she was interested in it and she thought you were the best at it and she thought you could, you should be more like higher up or whatever. She just really believed in all of us. And so whatever the thing is that we're interested in, she's always asking about it, asking about our friends. And then, yeah, just now, like even into adulthood, always just asking about life and giving advice. And she was just present, and there was never, you always knew that she believed in you and that she wanted to hear from you. It was never like you never thought you were a nuisance or annoying. It was always she wanted to hear from you.
What I would give for another conversation. So, this COVID-19 sheltering in place, you have opportunities that are afforded because of a bad, difficult situation to sometimes be together and not be distracted by other things, to share dinners, to ask questions around a table. What Rebekah said, she was always asking us about our lives. And if it was an interest to us, even though that's not something that she would be into, she was fully invested. When I played football in high school, she hated it. She hated the fact that people hit each other. When I wanted to wrestle, she said, no, that's where I draw the line. You cannot break a chair over someone's head. I said, Mom, that's not wrestling. That's a different kind of wrestling. When Rebekah, what did she say to you when you were running cross country?
Oh, she would call me before my cross country meets, and she would leave me these voicemails and say, if you get tired, just walk. Just walk.
So not the one you would go to for inspiration for athletics, but because she was interested in us, she would be at our games. She would be at her granddaughter's cross country meet. Even if you couldn't see her, cross country meets are like that. And they start running, and then you don't see them until they come back. And yet, she would always talk about, boy, when I saw Rebekah run, I saw the determination on her face, and she was trying so hard, and she was inspired by that. Even though she said, you should have never perspire. Don't make yourself sweat. I just want to encourage you, be interested in what your kids are interested in. And if you are a kid that's out there, be interested in your parents and your grandparents. Last night we started sharing stories, and we were still discovering things that we didn't know. And there were still things that were shared that were new to us. I'll close with this picture. Found a box of letters. This letter was written from my mom to my dad when my mom had just moved to Indiana to get her master's degree, and my dad was living in Los Angeles. They were not married yet. And it was a letter that is very personal. I'm not going to read all the contents, but I will let you know that it was a letter asking my dad, saying, are you sure that I'm the right person for you to marry? Because if so, you should go talk to a priest and ask some things about faith, and I will do the same, because that has to be the center of our relationship. So pass these things on. The things that are dear to us, the things that cause us to want to live and to go to the next day. Love you guys. Tomorrow, you guys will be blessed. Pastor Tony Dettel, is going to be hosting our Facebook Live. And it's something that you won't want to miss. So, love you guys. Praying for you. Thank you for all the prayers and the love and support. And I will see you next time.